Hi, everybody. Welcome in. I'm WCA3 Chief Meteorologist Kevin Lighty coming to you here tonight, November 17th. And for many of you, that may be a day that you can recall that something big occurred on this day 8 years ago, back in 2013. It's hard to believe it's been 8 years when, again, a very large tornado outbreak occurred across much of the state of Illinois, multiple tornadoes, and several that occurred right here in parts of central Illinois. And we have somebody joining us that was in the thick of it that night. He was the one on the air covering those tornado warnings along with his team. And he was me before me. And many of you are going to recognize him. I appreciate him joining us here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to meteorologist Derick Fabert. Of course, you may recognize him from formerly being right here in the same spot I was. Derick, thanks for joining us here tonight. And how you doing, man?
I'm good. Is it the same spot? Like, I know the studio is completely redone. Is the weather kind of still on that one side of the studio?
It's actually, no, it's completely opposite. I'm standing right now where the old anchor desk used to be. This is where the anchor desk was. And so the weather center's kind of shifted around to the side. So it looks very different than what it did, obviously, just about a year ago. But yeah, things have changed a bit. And just before we get into talking about this, tell everybody, tell all the viewers out there how you're doing, what you're up to here these days.
So I live in Indianapolis, or southwest of Indianapolis, in Mooresville, which is just north of my hometown of Brooklyn that I grew up in. So kind of back to my roots. This is my office right here where I work every day. I work from home as a web developer. I'm not just a work from home when COVID happens person. I work from home all the time. So I write code for websites, mostly kind of financial institutions is what the company I work for does. I do some other side stuff with that as well, but married the lovely Anna Carrera as well once we got over here, and we are expecting our first child in a few weeks from now, so we're excited about that. And yeah, that's kind of the update on life. As you know, Kevin, once the kid starts to show up, it kind of like, okay, that's life now, and so that's kind of what we're looking forward to.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations to you. And yes, I know very much so. The life-changing, altering things that happen. My little one now 5.5 months old now. So congratulations to you. And, listen, we're here to talk to you about that day that occurred 8 years ago. So much, to dive into between the, just the setup of that day and just kind of, what it was like for you. And I know you've got a lot of memories from that day, from the coverage, I'm sure post coverage as well. And so we just kind of want to talk about, that setup, kind of take us back to 8 years ago when you were gearing up. It was a day that you knew something big could potentially happen, right?
Oh, yeah. I was on a 3-day weekend, actually, and spending time with family in Indiana. My family has this huge leaf raking weekend where we, as my brothers and I joke about, we clean the forest for Dad. We rake leaves and burn them, and it's a good time. And so I was over there and called Mike Taylor, who's now in Detroit, and just kind of checked in, knowing that Sunday could have a potential. When I left on Thursday, not a huge chance, but by Saturday morning when I called him, we were in a moderate risk. Things looked a little more serious. And yeah, I can just tell by talking to Mike. And I didn't have like internet service out there. So I wasn't in a situation where I could look up the data myself. I had to completely lean on Mike. And he just had that tone in his voice of like, you need to get back. And so I came back that Saturday night. I got home or got to the station somewhere during the 10 o'clock newscast. Mike kind of dropped all the data on me and said, here's what I'm thinking. And I said, okay, what's this midnight risk area going to look like? When the SBC updates the outlook. And he said, we're going to be in a high risk. I'm telling you. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you've been forecasting. I haven't, and I remember at midnight. So I kind of had this joke with Mike that no matter how bad the weather was, if it was on the weekend, it was his to cover. And it was a joke, but also one of those things where I didn't want to come in and step on someone else's toes when it's their time to be on air. And when I told him that, he just was like, oh, no, you're doing this tomorrow. And I remember when the high risk came out, he was like, you're definitely doing this tomorrow. And I'm like, obviously I'll be the kind of point guy. And Mike and Lisa were great on air that weekend, behind the scenes, everything. And then I remember waking up Sunday morning, and I remember I had a dog at the time that I decided to take to the station with me and put in what is now the CI Living Green Room. I don't remember what it was then. And an intern actually watched him during that time. And I remember as I was loading up his tote and some other things that I was bringing with me that day, it was warm enough and humid enough that I started sweating. And I thought, it's November 17th, and I've been working for 5 minutes, and I'm sweating. Now I sweat a lot, but not to that point. And from there, once I got in, I got there about 3 minutes before Mike did. Mike got there about 2 minutes before Lisa did, and from there it was kind of game on for the whole day. I'll never forget kind of one of the high risk got extended westward. Got to that graphic right there at I believe it's the 13Z update. So you have to remind me.
Yep, it is the 13Z. Yep.
Yeah. So 7 o'clock in the morning it gets updated to that, and then I'll never forget mesoscale discussion 2010. That was the moment when and for those who don't know what a mesoscale discussion is, that's kind of when the National Weather Service starts discussing putting a watch out. And I don't know why that sticks out, but I mean, I have it up on my screen right now. But I remember MD 2010 like it was just yesterday. And that was the moment where I'm like, man, and I'm looking at this. This was at 7:47 in the morning. So it was like sun, daylight came out, boom, storm started popping as soon as, it was just an absolute grenade of a day when as soon as the sun hit the ground, we were off and running. And I remember mesoscale discussion 2010 like it was just yesterday. I mean, I could almost draw that graphic that they had on there. 80% chance of a tornado watch, and it ended up being a PDS watch, which is a particularly dangerous situation. And from there, you know how it goes, Kevin. You get on the air, and it kind of just is a blur.
Yeah.
And it was 4 hours of a blur.
Yeah. Here's that watch you're talking about right there.
Yeah.
There's the watch. Look at that. Valid from what is that? 8:40 a.m. until 4 p.m. Yeah.
And normally when you get an 8:40 in the morning tornado watch, it's because of a dying MCS overnight that's still kind of a line of storms. And by 9:15, we had supercells. I mean, Washington got hit. I don't remember, but it was, I think, before noon. I think well before noon. And, that was the tornado that we knew it was going to be a bad day, but that was the one that's like confirmed it. This is a bad day.
Yeah, so I've got some images there from Washington. Here's just a small little image. I mean, look how huge that thing is. And of course, that was the strongest tornado up there. Just look how huge that thing is. Very powerful, and like you said, that set the tone, I'm sure, for the day. And you're going, wow, if they're getting it up here, what are we going to get down here? I'm sure. Yeah,
there was an image that I think a WMED reporter posted, and it was just kind of a panoramic. And it was like all you saw was nothing. you know what it looks like. You were in Joplin, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
And Joplin was obviously a lot worse, but even the EF4 that hit Washington was just the pictures coming out of that was just this like gut punch of like, wow, that's what's heading our direction. I remember we put that on the air as soon as we got it to make people realize, because we can sit there and talk in front of the greens, yellows, and reds, and purple polygons and all that stuff. But when that means nothing until you show something out, you show the image. And I remember as soon as that came in, Mike Taylor was running back to and was like, we got to get this on. And Mike, if you ever met Mike, is just the nicest, softest spoken. He's not real soft spoken, maybe not the right word, but he's just kind of a down to earth guy. And he was like amped up, like, we got to get this on the air now, so people will see this and take this seriously. And we just kept, every time we had a little down moment, we kind of let's show that image once again, and we did. So that was the Washington tornado. You have that pit in your stomach feeling, and then it's like, okay, this is happening. This is real. This isn't just a bunch of colors on the screen.
And you're right. Having those images, I'm sure it made, some people go, okay, we're going to treat this one a little bit differently today. This isn't going to be just your typical, regular tornado warning. This could actually be something. But at that same time, and let's be honest here, you know how it is working in broadcasting. When you cut in for severe weather coverage, sometimes you're cutting into people's programming. And on that day, what programming was on WCIA that day?
There was a Bears game, at least for part of it. We actually cut in before the Bears game started, if I remember right, because kickoff's at noon. And I think our first tornado warning out in Morgan County was before then. I know what the first tornado warning for our viewing area was Morgan County. I specifically remember that. And I had texted somebody that worked at the station and said, hey, heads up, we're going to be on the air a lot today. And his response was, just keep in mind there's a Bears game. And my response to that person was, yeah, this is a really bad day. And he said, okay, but there's a Bears game. And later, that person said, I made the right call. He was not realizing how bad of a day that day was going to be. But we did get a lot of hate for that, to the point to where, I mean, they were, I'll call them what they were death threats. And I remember I was, you're on Twitter. I was using, this. People always thought I was like playing with my phone, like I'm playing Angry Birds or something in the middle of severe weather, but was checking Twitter and just looking at just hate. I mean, people just being angry about it. And so we tried to, as much as possible, show the live feed from Soldier Field. Now, one of the reasons we did that was because we had there was no game. The game actually was delayed. That game, I mean, they were evacuating Soldier Field. That game didn't finish until I watched the finish of that game later that evening, while I was still at the station. I think it ended on a game-winning field goal they were playing.
No, it actually did. I looked it up. They were playing the Ravens because I couldn't remember the game, and I looked it up. And they did win that day on a last second field goal. So
I remember I was walking through the studio or the newsroom, and just trying to get everything ready for the 6 or 10. I can't remember. No, we were getting ready for the 10, and I remember just kind of glancing over, and I'm like, oh, that game's still on. Well, yeah, it had a 4-hour delay in the middle of it. As Chicago dealt with the same line of storms we did. I actually made a joke on air during that. I don't remember the Ravens player, but he was standing in the tunnel and lightning struck and he jumped back, and it looked like he had never seen lightning in his life. And that actually got a few people on Twitter too, like, oh, well, that's pretty funny that he made fun of. Gosh, I wish I had that covered. I had the coverage somewhere, but I wish I had that moment of like, it was just like a moment of like, kind of in all this chaos of just something kind of funny. But it was very serious, obviously. It was, the Bears game is something my family still talks about that.
Oh, I still hear people talk about that here. And, they talk about that day, how they remember the Bears game. They remember you guys having to cut in, but then they remember also how, the weather was so bad in Chicago as well, that there was this level of, wow, okay, it must be really bad if they're clearing the stadium out. And then of course, everything that followed after that, obviously, justified everything. Not that you need the justification for we're on the air, as we're doing it for a reason. But, at what point would you say that, once you saw the Washington stuff, but then you started seeing things getting closer and into our viewing area here, when did it kind of hit you like, oh man, somebody's going to get it here?
Well, I think there were two moments. One, the Washington tornado, and then there was a hail report that was of like, I want to say it was 4-inch hail it was in McLean County. I remember that much. And we did not think hail was going to be that big of a deal that day. We thought hail would be kind of okay, we get some nickels here and there and stuff like that. But when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's monster stuff. And I remember taking back, and Lisa was handling all this stuff, and I just kind of looked back at the radar and saw the stack of tornado warnings coming towards 57, and thought, the next hour to an hour and a half is going to be really interesting, and maybe not in a good way. I remember specifically, and kind of, I'm going a little bit beyond your question here, but
You're fine.
Specifically, there was a moment where we kind of got all the warnings were about to expire, and something needed to be reset. I don't remember what it was. You know how the weather computers can be. Well, how they used to be, I don't know how they are now. But we just needed
Sure.
like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I think it was the sky cams. And so we were like, hey, real quick, we're going to be gone for 90 seconds. We'll be right back. We jumped off. I choked down a bottle of water. Mike reset something. We went back on. And I remember saying to Lisa and Mike, like, give me the next 90 minutes. Let's get through this and we're going to be good. And I remember halfway through that, or not towards the end of it, as storms are exiting Edgar County, which, as you know, is always like the last hold on Edgar and Marshall counties. Yeah. Those are the ones that keep you there till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Of course.
Yeah. And I remember as it's exiting it, we started getting the first what's really happening in Gifford reports. And as I said earlier, it's a blur. And I don't remember at this point saying Gifford. Do not remember it at all. And Mike Taylor, at the end of it, we kind of get down and Mike and I make eye contact. And all I could say was, please tell me I said Gifford. And he goes, I don't know, Derick, it's a blur.
Oh, my.
And I'm like, oh, just like this gut feeling, like, oh my gosh, please. So I'm laying in bed that night. It's like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm wide awake. and there's, I remember walking into that 2 days later. And I'm wide awake, and my phone, the light, I get a text message. It lights up the room. And Mike, I don't remember the exact number, but Mike had texted me. He said, just watched all of our coverage. You said Gifford 8 times, I think it was, before it got hit. And it was just like this weight lifted off my shoulder. Like we did everything we could.
Yeah. Well, and we've already had some comments in here that said, Derick, you gave us the best warning that day. You said, Gifford, take cover. And my power went out 5 minutes after my whole house was gone. And so, I mean, people still remember that and remember you giving those great warnings that day. And, that's, I get it, man. Like you in the moment, you just don't know. You don't remember exactly what you may have said because you're just going storm by storm and doing your thing. But people definitely remember WCIA and you for the coverage and your team you had that day. Still to this day, 8 years later.
Well, yeah, and that makes you feel good. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. That makes you feel really like proud of what you did. And it was kind of I was a meteorologist for 10 years. I mean, I still consider myself a meteorologist. I was a practicing meteorologist, I guess you could say.
No, absolutely.
But that was kind of the capstone day. That was the day of like, everything I had worked for and everything I had practiced kind of came together, and everything that goes beyond just my own personal growth. That goes, what we had built at WCIA with the advancing in technology at that time, and teamwork between Mike, Lisa, and I. The three of us worked really well together, and it showed on that day. Kevin, it's not one person that makes these things happen. I mean, I watched you guys the night Taylorville got hit, and if I remember right, you were out chasing.
Yeah, I was out chasing that day. Jack was back in the studio. Yep.
Yeah. And we didn't have a chase vehicle or anything like that. So all three of us were in the studio, and we just, made it work with what we had. And I remember there was something that morning of like, well, let's try to do this. And I'm like, we're not trying new stuff today.
Not today.
Yeah, not today.
Not today. Not on a high risk day. We're gonna go by the book.
Yeah. So, I remember, just in an odd way, feeling satisfied after that because nobody died, and that was the ultimate goal. 6 injured in Gifford, if I remember right. 6 reported injuries. Obviously, a lot of other people had nicks and cuts and stuff like that. But on a day like that, to get out of that day with nobody dead was a minor miracle. I mean, in our viewing area, Washington lost a person. But gosh, look at the high risk they had down in like 2011, April 27th, 2011, Alabama, and 300 plus people died.
Yep.
And that's not, that hit Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, big populations.
Sure.
But a high risk day, you hate to say it, but you kind of expect somebody to perish on that day. So.
Yeah. And like you said, and I know we focus on the Gifford tornado here, but let's see here. I've got, those are all the tornado tracks there, or all the tornadoes, the little red T's there. You had Westville, that was an EF2. You had Villa Grove there in southern Champaign County, and then there into Douglas County there. You had obviously the Gifford tornado. Pana had a tornado that day. And of course, we talked about the Washington one, but that Gifford one obviously stood out because here's a picture here that you could actually see in the harvested fields, the circulation, the actual circulation across the fields there with that. So while Gifford definitely was the strongest, it was that EF3, you had several other storms and other tornadoes that occurred that you guys were tracking that day as well.
Yeah, at one point I remember we had 6 tornado warnings all stacked up along I-57. And one of them, I noticed while somebody else was talking, and I picked up my phone and just was looking on radar scope real quick, and looked down at right near my family. I have family in Arthur, and there was a little spot of rotation just north of them. And it caught my eye. And at that point, there was no warning. So here we got 6 warnings, and there's a couplet that doesn't have a warning on it. And I remember we jumped on it real quick, and that ended up being the tornado that went just north of Tuscola. I almost said Tuscaloosa because we were talking about
Yeah.
But that one we actually talked about before the warning was even issued. And I know some people told us, because we were talking about it, they didn't even see the warning get issued. They saw us talk about it and said, all right, time to go to whatever. And they did. That was in southern, I think I was still in Douglas County at the time. So, it's funny, after 4 years, how many counties start to, orders aren't what they used to be. So that was also the first time I ever had to explain on air what the 30% hatched tornado area meant. You're like,
sure.
There's a 30% chance of a tornado hitting, and I'm like, well, there's a 30% chance of a tornado hitting within any spot in that. And I remember I was on the air explaining this because we had several questions about it, and I said, so if your house is in that area, there's a 30% chance that a tornado goes within 25 miles of your house. And Mike and I one time played with the tornado tracks, and we just moved it like north on the along, just north.
Sure.
And
yeah.
kept the ground where it was and moved the track. And it's like,
yeah,
if everything would have been about 15 miles north, think about, a tornado in Champaign. Gifford would have been missed, but there would have been a tornado, potentially, I think it was Gibson City or something like that. It could have been a much worse day. As crazy as that sounds, it could have been a much worse day. I mean, Washington gets hit. What if that same storm, as it went through Peoria, had already produced the tornado? So what if the tornado had happened 5 miles further southwest when it started? It could have been a worse day, but still, it's a pretty bad day. So
yeah, bad day. Lots of tornadoes there, and like you said, the wild thing is with those tornadoes there in our area here in Central Illinois, in our coverage area that WCA has, no deaths, and so that's pretty amazing for that to have been the case on such a day where, like you said, you expect that. You guys, after that, you guys were back in Gifford, watching, doing some of the coverage there. What can you remember from, seeing all that damage that they had and whatnot?
This was my first time I had ever covered a tornado where I went to the area that got hit right afterwards. And I remember a lot of people there were still some people that looked, I don't want to say shocked, but just kind of like, okay, what do I do? I remember that a lot. I remember the look on people's faces. A lot of people were very thankful for what they still had. I remember how much that community came together. I remember Bibb, may he rest in peace, making food for everybody. I remember Christina leading that town through so much. If I remember anything in particular, it was the spirit of the people there. There was a sign on the way in that says, "Don't tell." I don't exactly remember how it was phrased, but it was, don't tell God how big your storm is, tell the storm how big your God is. And that stuck out big time for me. I remember a lot of things. I remember from a damage perspective, Dave Benton and I were doing coverage. And I remember looking around and thinking, there's just stuff. Like, it's not trees, it's not lumber, it's not insulation, it's not shingles, it's not street signs. It's just all that. And it's just all over the place. And I remember looking in the ground, and there was somebody's high school tassel. And I thought, man, this is just people's lives, just, everywhere. And but the people of that town, once you talk to them, you realize they were going to be okay. I've seen bigger towns get hit by smaller tornadoes and not recover the way they did.
Well, I mean, just obviously a day that, it's going to be imprinted into your mind, I'm sure, going forward for forever. Like you said, just not just professionally, but personally as well, right?
Yeah, it was funny. You when you and I were tweet messaging back and forth, you said something about the 10-year, and that had crossed my mind earlier. Like, I got to go back and just visit, and
yeah.
I don't say hi to anybody, just walk the street and just kind of have my own moment for that. I want to say one more thing about our coverage that week, because we kind of focused a lot on the weather team, but I got to work with Dave Benton a lot that week. And I remember we had a 7:00 newscast that I think the 7 is now the 9, right?
Yes.
So we had the 7:00 coming up, and for some reason, it just got forgotten. We had done everything live in Gifford that day. All of our newscasts were live on Monday. And for some reason, nobody had really taken care of doing anything for the 7. And so we get a phone call kind of like, what can you guys do? And Dave goes, I'll handle the A block. A block's 7.5, 8 minutes long, And so he started asking me questions, and he's jotting down notes. And, Dave would ask me a question, and he's writing these notes, and I could never read Dave's handwriting, but he's just jotting down notes. And he goes, okay, follow me around. He tells the camera person, we're going to walk here, 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 here. And we filled the next 7.5 to 9 minutes of just walking around and talking about what I saw, what he saw. And we made news out of that. And I'll never forget Dave for that, because he just was like, we don't have a rundown for this show. Okay, I'll take some notes here and we'll figure it out. And that was the last time I really got to work, because it was not long after that his diagnosis happened. And then, of course, he eventually passed away. But I'll never forget working with Dave on that day about that on the Monday after. So.
Yeah, the team that you guys had there, and what you, like you said, what you built in the foundation of things, of course, before you with Robert and Judy and whatnot, and we try to carry that torch on here today as well. But like I said, it's the day that a lot of people remember here from 8 years ago, and you were a very crucial part into the coverage, and I speak for, I'm sure, many people out there watching, that you saved a ton of lives that day, you and your team. And it is something to be proud of and to never forget, for sure. But man, any kind of last closing thoughts for you, before we let you go?
Speaking of what you were just talking about, Judy called it my April 6th or April 19th, 1996 moment, which is the day that Ogden got hit, Urbana got hit. And I actually have a story about that day. We were driving from Indianapolis to Bloomington, and my stepmother had to go to the bathroom at the rest area that's just west of Danville there. And my dad, as any loving father would do, just, pulled right over, and we went right, And so we get to the bathroom, we found out there was a tornado in Ogden, and had she not had to go to the bathroom, we would have drove right into that. So I unfortunately have connections to the last 2 major tornado outbreaks in Central Illinois. I'd like to not be connected, I guess, to the. I guess some of the Taylorsville one.
We were going to want to have you come back and visit, but maybe now we don't want you to come back and visit.
I have family in Arthur, so I sneak in and out quite a bit.
There you go.
So I'm still standing down there on 133 at my cousin's house at every fireworks, and so I still come back when I can. But yeah, I would. You like the next time there's one. I don't know. Maybe they'll follow me over here to Indiana.
They usually do. They usually do.
Yeah, and you have family over here as well. Well, in Indiana.
I do. Yeah, they're just right there on the state line there. Good old Petersburg.
Yeah, and I always joke with Barons, like, when you go to Bloomington to cover a game, my house is right on the way there. So
sure.
He did stay here last year for March Madness.
That's right, he did. I remember that.
For 3 weekends in a row, and
I love it.
Not that I can talk much. My school went out the first weekend too. So.
Yeah. That's it's rough to be an Indiana sports fan. There's not too many good schools over there anymore. Who's the best team now? I don't even know. Is it Butler? Is it Ball State? I don't even know. It's not the powerhouses anymore.
Yeah, there's a top 6 team just up the road in West Lafayette. So.
Hey, come on now.
I think I was lucky because I'm a Purdue fan and you're an IU fan, if I remember right.
Yep.
I was lucky that there is not a lot of hate for Purdue in Champaign. I mean,
yeah,
Big Ten rival, all that stuff. But bro, I'm a Purdue guy, and I'm okay with IU. There's some Illinois fans that,
Yep.
They're not liking that part too much. So
no, that's so true. That's true. I've had to keep my Indiana fandom at least tamed down a little bit. Way more than I do for my Cubs that I definitely cheer loud and proud for. Even though half of our audience are Cardinals fans too, but definitely got to tame it down with the Indiana thing a little bit. I will say, no, go ahead.
We could do another one of these on the night the Cubs won the World Series.
Oh my gosh! We absolutely could.
We could easily. I could go on and on about when the home run was hit.
And you were on the air that night.
On the air that night, the home run happened right before the tie it up happened right before weather. I had friends that texted me and said you could tell you were upset. I was on the air that night. The rain delay happened right after the 10. I got a ride to Guido's where Luke Ray, former reporter, showed, and a couple other guys were hanging out watching the game. And Luke had just gotten delivered a beer. And I was all nerves and walked up and grabbed it right out of his hand and just I'll get you the next one. Just needed to get one out of the way. So,
oh, that's so good. Well, hey, we may have to have you back. I guess that would have been a couple of weeks ago. The anniversary to that, the 5-year anniversary to that, we could have done a whole thing a few weeks ago. But maybe we'll get it on the next one for sure. But hey, man, listen. Thanks for jumping in here with us. I think a lot of people, obviously, it's still fresh in their heads, man. I mean, this thing, 8 years ago, I know it seems like, a lifetime with everything that's gone on the past year or two. But, every time, this date comes up, people always remember it, and they're going to remember you guys and all your coverage and what you did to help save lives. Don't be a stranger, man. Next time you're over here, we'll show you the new digs we got. And if it's a day where there's weather, you're going to be our fifth meteorologist on the team. We're going to put you to work.
You'd have to show me how to use everything. I haven't used that. I can design your website now, or develop it. I'm not even a designer. I'm just a developer. But no, you guys are doing a good job over there. I keep an eye on stuff. Not that I'm judging or anything. Just
I got you.
Obviously, there's still a connection to all that stuff, and I still pay attention to my station up in South Dakota I worked at. But
sure.
Glad you got Jacob as well. Good kid, but don't take it too easy on him. He can get a very big head quickly.
There you go. There you go. We'll rein him in. We'll rein him in for you. All right, man. Well, again, thank you for everything, and we'll hopefully see you around these parts soon.
Hey, Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this.
No, absolutely. All right. Again, Derick Fabert, former chief meteorologist right here at WCA, played a huge role in the coverage from 8 years ago today with all those tornadoes that occurred. Good luck to you with the new one coming along soon, bud.
Thank you. I think I'm going to need it. Congratulations on
Yeah.
yours. So.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks everybody joining us here again for our little fun little Facebook kind of recap there, kind of going back to one of the key players that was here during that time. And we're gonna have more. We actually have a story coming up tonight on our newscast at 10 o'clock. I believe one of our reporters, Bryce Beeman, went out and talked to some people about this fateful day as well. So tune in tonight at 10 o'clock for her story as we talk about the tornado outbreak from 8 years ago. That's going to do it for me. We'll see you guys on the newscast tonight. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your Wednesday night.